He watched her drink it. So was it really a joke or planned? What did he
The
expect?
toxicologist snatched the glass out of my hand mid-sentence, his voice sharp, controlled. Don't drink another drop of that. I was sitting in a clinic, my fingers still wrapped around the same drink my brother had tampered with just an hour after dinner. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. He leaned over the table, smiling, and dropped a tablet into my glass while everyone watched. Called it a joke. And when it started fizzing, they laughed until I actually took a sip. But now the room was silent. The toxicologist wasn't laughing. He lifted the glass to his nose, paused, then his entire expression changed. He set it down carefully, looked straight at me, and asked, "Who gave this to you?" The toxicologist snatched the glass out of my hand mid-sentence, his voice sharp, controlled. Don't drink another drop of that. I was sitting in a clinic, my fingers still wrapped around the same drink my brother had tampered with just an hour after dinner. He leaned over the table, smiling, and dropped a tablet into my glass while everyone watched. Called it a joke. And when it started fizzing, they laughed until I actually took a sip. But now the room was silent. The toxicologist wasn't laughing. He lifted the glass to his nose, paused, then his entire expression changed. He set it down carefully, looked straight at me, and asked, "Who gave this to you?" "My brother," I said, before I could second guess it. The words felt heavier out loud than they had in my head, like they didn't belong in a normal conversation, like I just said something that couldn't be taken back. The toxicologist didn't react the way people usually did when I mentioned Ethan. No smile, no amused shake of the head, no "oh brothers," right? Nothing to soften it. He just nodded once, slow and deliberate, and slid the glass a few inches farther away from me. "Did you ingest any of it?" he asked. I swallowed. My throat still felt off. Tight, but not painful. Just wrong, in a way I couldn't explain. "Just a sip," I said. Not even a full mouthful. He held my gaze for a second longer than felt comfortable, like he was measuring something I couldn't see. Then he turned and called something out to a nurse, quiet, fast, clinical. Everything after that started moving in a way that didn't match how my brain felt. Too quick, too efficient. A blood pressure cuff tightened around my arm. Someone asked me my name, my age, if I had any allergies. Another person took the glass and sealed it inside a clear plastic bag, like it was evidence. Evidence. That word landed harder than anything else. I shifted in the chair, suddenly aware of how cold my hands felt. "Is this serious?" I asked. No one answered right away. The toxicologist came back into my line of sight, pulling on a pair of gloves. "I'm going to ask you a few more questions," he said. "I need you to be as precise as possible." Precise. Like this wasn't just a weird prank anymore. "Okay," I said, even though my voice didn't sound steady. "Where were you when this happened?" "At a restaurant, with my family." "What kind of tablet was it?" "I don't know," I admitted. "It was small, white, no label, no packaging. He just had it." "And he told you it was a joke?" "Yeah." I let out a short, humorless breath. He said it was nothing, that I needed to relax. The toxicologist's jaw tightened just slightly. "What did it taste like?" I hesitated, trying to pin it down. Bitter, metallic, and then my tongue felt kind of numb, just for a second. He nodded again, slower this time, like that detail mattered more than the others. Behind him, I could see the nurse labeling vials of blood with my name. My name, written in thick black marker, suddenly looked unfamiliar, like it belonged to someone else. Someone who didn't end up here because her brother thought it would be funny to drop something into her drink. My phone buzzed in my lap. I glanced down. "Ethan?" "Of course." A text lit up the screen. "You seriously left?" Another one came through before I could even process the first. Mom's pissed. You made it weird. My chest tightened not from whatever I'd swallowed, but from how normal that sounded. How predictable. Like this was still somehow my fault. I didn't respond. A third message appeared. It was harmless, Lila. Don't start something. I turned the phone face down. The toxicologist noticed. His eyes flicked to it, then back to me. Is that him? I nodded. Has he contacted you since you left? Just now. What did he say? I hesitated, then repeated it. Word for word. Something shifted in the room again. Subtle, but there. Like the air had gotten heavier. The toxicologist exhaled slowly through his nose. All right, he said. We're going to run a few tests. In the meantime, I don't want you consuming anything else. No water, no food, nothing, until we clear it. That didn't feel like something you said for a harmless joke. My fingers curled against the edge of the chair. You still haven't told me what you think it is. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he picked up the sealed bag with the glass inside and held it up to the light, studying the faint residue clinging to the sides. I'm not going to speculate, he said finally. Not yet. Not yet. The words hung there, unfinished. Then why did you stop me? I pressed. You didn't even hesitate. This time, he did look at me differently. Not just clinical, not distant, focused. Because, he said carefully, that reaction you described, the taste, the numbness, the way it dissolved, he paused, like he was deciding how much to say. And for the first time since I'd walked into the clinic, I felt something colder than fear settle in my stomach. Not confusion, not embarrassment, something sharper. What? I asked. He lowered the glass slowly, his voice quieter now, but somehow more serious. I've seen that pattern before. My pulse spiked. With what? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached for his phone, already dialing someone. And as he turned slightly away, I caught just one sentence under his breath. Low, urgent, and nothing like the calm tone he'd used with me. We may need to report this. I should have refused to drink it. That thought wouldn't leave me as I sat there in the clinic, staring at my hands while the toxicologist stepped just outside the room to make his call. It kept replaying over and over, but every version ended the same way, with everyone at that table watching me, waiting. I leaned back slightly in the chair, the paper lining crinkling under me, and closed my eyes for a second. Dinner hadn't started like anything unusual. That was the part that bothered me the most. It was my mom's birthday. We were at her favorite restaurant, too loud, too crowded, the kind of place where waiters rushed past constantly and no one really paid attention to anyone else's table. Ethan had picked it, of course. He always picked. He'd arrived late, made an entrance, pulled attention the second he walked in. That was normal too. People shifted around him without realizing it, conversations bending, focus moving, everything adjusting, so he stayed in the center. I'd barely gotten a hey before he started telling some story about work, something vague but impressive sounding. No one asked questions, they never did. And then, at some point between appetizers and drinks arriving, he'd leaned closer to me, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Hey, he'd said quietly, like he was about to share something with just me. I remember turning slightly, expecting, I don't know, a normal interaction. Instead, his hand came up over my glass. I didn't even process it at first. Something small dropped in, a soft plunk. Then the fizzing started. Not slow, not subtle, immediate sharp bubbles racing to the surface like something reacting too fast. What I started. But he was already smiling. That same smile. Relax, he said, just loud enough for the table to hear. It's just a joke. A few people laughed instantly, like it was a cue. What did you put in there? I asked, my hand tightening around the glass but not lifting it. Nothing bad, Ethan said, shrugging like I was the one making it weird. You're fine. That's not an answer. Lila, my mom cut in, already sounding tired. It's your brother. He's not going to hurt you. Not going to hurt you. The words sat wrong even then. Across the table, my cousin leaned forward, grinning. You used to chug mystery drinks in college, didn't you? What happened? More laughter. It stacked up quickly, overlapping, filling any space where hesitation could have existed. I looked back at the glass, still fizzing. Seriously, I said, quieter now. What is it? Ethan tilted his head slightly, watching me, not answering. Just watching. That was the moment something shifted. It wasn't the tablet. It wasn't even the fizzing. It was the way he didn't explain. Like he didn't need to. Like the outcome was already decided. Drink it, someone said, half joking, half not. Don't be dramatic, another voice added. And just like that, it wasn't about the tablet anymore. It was about me. I could feel it every pair of eyes, every expectation. If I pushed it further, I'd be the problem. I'd ruin the mood. I'd turn a joke into something serious. Ethan didn't say anything else. He didn't have to. He just leaned back in his chair, still watching like he was waiting for a result. I remember thinking, if this is nothing, then refusing makes it worse. So I lifted the glass, just a small sip, I told myself. Enough to end it. The second it touched my tongue, I knew something was off. Not just the taste, bitter, metallic, but the way it spread. Too fast, too sharp. I swallowed anyway. Set the glass down. There, I said, forcing my voice steady. Happy? The table moved on almost immediately. Conversations picked back up. Someone asked about dessert, like nothing had happened. Except Ethan didn't look away. Not right away. He was still watching me, that same quiet focus in his eyes. Not amused, not relaxed, studying. And then, just before he finally leaned back and joined the conversation again, he said something under his breath so low I almost missed it. Good. Back in the clinic, my eyes snapped open. That word echoed louder now than it had at the table. Not funny, not relax, not got you. Good. I sat up straighter, my pulse picking up again as the memory settled into place differently than before, because that didn't sound like a joke. It sounded like a result. The door opened, and the toxicologist stepped back in, his expression more controlled now, but not lighter, not reassured. If anything, more focused. He closed the door behind him, slower this time, and before I could say anything, he looked directly at me and said, "Has your brother ever done anything like this before?" I didn't answer him right away. Not because I didn't have an answer, because suddenly I had too many. The toxicologist stayed standing near the door, one hand still resting on the handle, waiting without pushing. In the silence, I could hear movement out in the hallway, cartwheels, low voices, a monitor beeping somewhere farther down, but inside that room, everything felt sealed off. My brother's always done things, I said finally. Not like this, I don't think, but he likes making people uncomfortable and then acting like they're the problem for reacting. The toxicologist said nothing, so I kept going. When we were kids, he used to hide my stuff and swear he hadn't touched it while I tore my room apart looking for it. In high school, he switched out my shampoo with hair dye once and told everyone I was being paranoid before it even happened. At my college graduation, he gave a toast that was supposed to be funny and spent 3 minutes talking about how I cried during my driver's test. I looked down at my hands. Everything with him is always framed like a joke. If you get upset, you're too sensitive. If you push back, you're ruining the mood. The toxicologist crossed the room and sat on the rolling stool across from me. And your family? I gave a short laugh that didn't sound like one. They call it his personality. He nodded once. Not like he agreed, like he understood the structure of it. Then he asked, did he ever have access to chemicals, medications, industrial products? That question made me look up. Yes, I said slowly. I mean, sort of. He works with suppliers. He brokers materials for different companies, mostly industrial stuff, I think. I frowned. I don't know exactly what all of it is. Has he ever talked about testing substances, dosage, reactions? For a second, I just stared at him. Then a memory surfaced so fast it made my stomach drop. A few weeks earlier, my mom had hosted a Sunday lunch. Ethan had been there, half paying attention, scrolling through emails on his phone while talking to our uncle about work. I hadn't been part of the conversation, but I remembered a phrase because of the way he'd said it, casual, amused, like he thought he was smarter than everyone in the room. People always think tiny amounts don't matter. That's not how exposure works. At the time, I'd assumed he was repeating something he'd heard from a client. Now, it sounded different. He said something once, I said carefully, about small amounts still doing damage. I didn't think anything of it then. The toxicologist's expression didn't change, but his attention sharpened. When? Maybe 2 weeks ago. Did he say what he was talking about? No, just that people underestimate low doses. He leaned back slightly, processing that. My phone buzzed again, then a third time in quick succession. I didn't want to look, but I did. Mom, where are you? Mom, Ethan said you ran out over nothing. Ethan, do not make this into some insane accusation. A fourth message appeared before I could even lock the screen. Ethan, call me now. My skin went cold. The toxicologist noticed the change in my face. Show me. I hesitated, then handed him the phone. He read the messages quickly, then passed it back without comment. But the room felt different after that. Less like a medical exam, more like the moment right before someone says something official. A nurse entered with a tray and set it beside me. Lab wants one more vial, she said. I nodded automatically, extending my arm. While she tied the band around my bicep, the toxicologist stood and stepped a few feet away, speaking quietly to someone in the hall. I only caught fragments. Chain of custody. Preserve the sample. Yes, she states, he administered it directly. My heart started pounding harder. The nurse glanced at me, maybe noticing, maybe not. Try to relax your hand. I opened my fingers and realized I'd curled them into a fist so tight my nails had left half moons in my palm. When she left, the toxicologist came back in holding a clipboard and the sealed bag with my glass. He didn't sit down this time. We've sent the residue for analysis, he said. I don't have full confirmation yet, but based on the odor, your symptoms, and the way the substance dissolved, this is not consistent with a prank product, an over-the-counter supplement, or anything meant to be consumed socially. I felt my mouth go dry. What does that mean? It means, he said evenly, someone introduced something into your drink that had no business being there. The words hit harder than I expected, maybe because they were so controlled. No drama, no exaggeration, just a fact placed directly in front of me. I stared at him. Are you saying he poisoned me? I'm saying, he replied, that intent is a legal question. Exposure is a medical one. That answer scared me more than if he'd just said yes. Because it sounded practiced, precise, like he was choosing each word because the situation had already crossed into territory where wording mattered. I could hear Ethan's voice in my head again. It was harmless, Lila. Don't start something. But the toxicologist was already reaching for the phone on the counter. I stood up too fast, the room tilting slightly. Wait, what are you doing? He looked at me, then at the sealed glass in his hand, and said very calmly, I'm calling this in. I'm calling this in. The words didn't fully register at first. Calling who? I asked, my voice catching somewhere between confusion and something sharper. The toxicologist didn't hesitate. This meets the threshold for a reportable incident, he said. Potential chemical exposure administered without consent. Administered. Without consent. Each word landed with a kind of finality that made everything from dinner rearrange itself in my head like the scene had been flipped over, and now I was seeing what had always been there. My brother, I started, but the sentence didn't go anywhere. There wasn't a version of it that made this sound smaller. He nodded once. You've already told me that, and I need you to understand something clearly, Lila. His tone stayed even, but firmer now. What happened to you is being treated as an exposure case. That means documentation, testing, and, depending on the results, escalation. Escalation. The room suddenly felt too tight. I sat back down slowly, my legs not entirely steady. I only took a sip, I said, like that might still keep this contained. It wasn't. I didn't even finish it. That's the only reason we're having this conversation calmly, he replied. Calmly. That word didn't match the way my pulse was hitting against my ribs. He turned slightly, speaking into the phone now, his voice low and professional again. I caught pieces, just enough to understand the direction things were moving. Adult, female, mid-20s. Unknown compound, non-commercial presentation. Administered by known individual. Sample preserved. I pressed my hands together, trying to steady them. This wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. It wasn't something I could smooth over with a conversation later or laugh off so everyone else would be comfortable again. This was becoming something official, something that wouldn't go away just because Ethan said it was a joke. My phone buzzed again. I didn't want to look this time, but I did. Ethan, you need to answer me. Now. Ethan, whatever you're telling people, stop. Ethan, you're making this worse than it is. My jaw tightened. Making this worse like I'd created it. Like the tablet hadn't existed until I reacted to it. Another message came in. This time from my mom. Mom, the clinic? Seriously? Lila, come back. This is getting ridiculous. I stared at the screen. Something in my chest shifting. Less panic now, more clarity. Not relief. Not yet. Just alignment. For the first time, their reactions didn't make me question myself. They made everything sharper. I looked up as the toxicologist ended his call and turned back toward me. What happens now? I asked. We wait for confirmation, he said. Preliminary indicators suggest a compound that affects neural response. I won't speculate further until the lab verifies. Neural. My stomach dropped. That numb feeling you described, he continued, is consistent with certain classes of substances that interfere with signaling. In small exposures, symptoms can be temporary. In larger ones, he stopped. Didn't finish it. Didn't need to. I swallowed. And you think he just had that on him? I think, the toxicologist said carefully, that whatever was in your drink is not something people carry casually, which raises questions about access, intent, and awareness. Awareness. The word echoed louder than the others. Because Ethan hadn't looked surprised when I drank it. He hadn't laughed the way everyone else had. He'd watched, measured, waited. Good. The memory hit again. Clearer this time. Not playful. Not teasing. Satisfied. I felt something cold settle into place. This wasn't a prank that went too far. It was something he expected to work. A knock at the door interrupted the silence. A different staff member stepped in, older, more formal, holding a thin folder. He nodded briefly to the toxicologist before looking at me. Miss Moreno, he said, we're going to need to ask you a few additional questions for documentation. Documentación. It kept coming back to that. I nodded slowly. Okay. The man stepped further into the room, closing the door behind him with a soft click, the kind of quiet sound that somehow carried more weight than anything loud. He opened the folder, glancing down at the first page. Just to confirm, he said, you're stating that your brother introduced an unknown substance into your drink and you consumed it under social pressure. I hesitated, not because I didn't know the answer, because saying it like that made it real in a way nothing else had yet. Every version of the night, the laughter, the dismissals, the way it had been framed fell away under that one sentence. Unknown substance. Social pressure. I looked from him to the toxicologist, then down at my hands, and then I said it. Yes, the word felt different than before. Not reactive. Not defensive. Final. The man wrote something down, then flipped to the next page. And has your brother ever discussed chemical effects, dosage, or testing substances in your presence prior to this incident? My breath caught. That conversation 2 weeks ago. The way he'd said it, I opened my mouth and stopped. Because for the first time, a new thought pushed through everything else. Not what he did. Not what I drank. But why? I looked up slowly and asked, before I could stop myself, what if he knew exactly what it would do? The room went completely still after I said it. What if he knew exactly what it would do? No one answered right away. The man with the folder stopped writing. The toxicologist didn't move, but something in his posture shifted, subtle, controlled, like a line had just been crossed from possibility into something closer to certainty. That, the toxicologist said carefully, is exactly what we're trying to determine. Not dismissing it. Not correcting me, taking it seriously. A few minutes later, the door opened again. The same nurse from earlier stepped in, but this time she wasn't alone. She handed the toxicologist a printed sheet, fresh, still warm, and he scanned it quickly. I watched his eyes move across the page, then stop. He exhaled slowly, and for the first time since I'd walked in, he didn't look uncertain. He looked sure. He lowered the paper and turned it so both I and the man with the folder could see. The lab confirmed the compound, he said. My fingers tightened against the edge of the chair. What is it? He tapped a line on the page. It's a research-grade neuroactive agent, not approved for consumption, not commercially available. It's typically handled in controlled environments, labs, industrial research settings. My stomach dropped. Neuroactive. That means what, exactly? I asked, even though part of me didn't want the answer. It interferes with neural signaling, he said. In small doses, it can cause localized numbness, altered sensory perception. In higher doses or repeated exposure, it carries risk of more serious neurological disruption. The room felt colder. But I only took a sip, I said again, quieter now. And that likely limited your exposure, he replied. Which is why your symptoms have stayed mild so far. We'll continue monitoring, but based on what we're seeing, you avoided the worst case outcome. Avoided. Not impossible. Not unlikely. Avoided. I nodded slowly, trying to process it. And he knew? I asked. The toxicologist didn't answer immediately. He glanced at the man with the folder, then back at me. We can't assign intent without investigation, he said, but this isn't a substance someone mistakes for something harmless. Access alone suggests a level of awareness. Access. Awareness. The two words locked together in my mind, because Ethan had both. I knew that now. The man with the folder stepped forward slightly. Miss Moreno, based on these findings, this incident will be formally reported. Given the nature of the substance and how it was administered, this may be investigated as a criminal matter. Criminal. The word didn't feel abstract anymore. It felt attached. To him, to my brother. I swallowed, my throat still faintly tight. What happens to him? That depends on multiple factors, the man said. But introducing a hazardous substance into someone's drink without consent, especially one with known neurological effects, can carry serious legal consequences. I let that settle. Because for the first time, There was no one laughing it off, no one minimizing it, no one reframing it as something harmless. It was being called exactly what it was. My phone buzzed again. This time, I picked it up. Ethan, answer me right now. Ethan, whatever story you're telling, fix it. Ethan, you're going to regret this. I stared at the last message. Then, for the first time all night, I typed back, "They tested it." The response came almost instantly. Tested what? I watched the screen for a second. Then I sent one more message. "I know what it is." There was a pause, longer than any before. Then, "You're overreacting." I let out a slow breath, same pattern, same deflection, but it didn't land the same way anymore. Because now I knew something he didn't expect me to know. He wasn't ahead of it anymore. The toxicologist gently took the phone from my hand and set it face down on the counter. "You don't need to engage with him right now," he said. I nodded. And for once, I didn't feel the urge to explain myself, or soften it, or make it easier for anyone else. Hours passed in a blur of monitoring, questions, and quiet updates. My symptoms didn't worsen. The numbness faded. The tightness in my throat eased. But something else didn't. Clarity. By the time I was cleared to leave with instructions for follow-up testing and a number to call if anything changed, it was already early morning. The parking lot outside the clinic was almost empty. Cold, quiet. I stood there for a second, holding the discharge papers in my hand, the night finally catching up to me. Not the panic, not the fear, just the weight of what had actually happened. And what came next? The investigation moved faster than I expected. Within days, they had traced the compound back to a supplier Ethan had worked with. Records showed he'd accessed it under the pretense of facilitating a transfer between clients. There were messages too, not to me, to someone else. Fragments that, when put together, didn't look like a joke. Small exposure should be enough to observe initial response. No one takes it seriously if it's framed casually. She won't question it if everyone else is laughing. I didn't see them directly, but I was told enough to understand that this hadn't been spontaneous. It had been planned, controlled, measured. The charges followed: reckless endangerment, unlawful administration of a hazardous substance, additional counts depending on how the case developed. Ethan denied everything at first, said it was a misunderstanding, said he thought it was harmless, but the evidence didn't shift, and neither did the tone around him. At home, things fractured quickly. My mom called me more than once. At first, she sounded like she always had. Urgent, frustrated. "Lila, this has gone too far. You need to talk to them." "Explain?" "There's nothing to explain," I said. A pause. Then, softer. "He's your brother." I looked down at my hands, remembering the glass, the fizzing, the way he'd watched. "I know," I said. "That's the problem." After that, the calls changed. Less frequent, more uncertain, because the version of events they'd relied on, the joke, the overreaction, the misunderstanding, couldn't hold anymore. Not against evidence. Not against a report. Not against what it actually was. Ethan lost clients. Then contracts. Then his position entirely. People distanced themselves quietly at first, then more openly as details spread. Not dramatically, not loudly, just consistently. The way reputations actually collapse. As for me, the follow-ups stayed clear. No lasting neurological damage, no delayed complications, but something did change. Small things, at first. Watching drinks more carefully, not leaving them unattended, not taking anything at face value just because someone said it was fine. Then bigger things, saying no without explaining. leaving situations without negotiating my way out of them, not shrinking just to keep things smooth. A week later, I sat alone in a cafe. Quiet, controlled, nothing like that restaurant. I ordered a drink, watched the barista make it, watched every step. When they set it down in front of me, I didn't touch it right away, just looked at it. Clear glass, still liquid. No movement, no reaction. Normal. I wrapped my fingers around it slowly, lifted it, paused, then took a sip. No bitterness, no numbness, no one watching, no one waiting. I set the glass down gently, and for the first time since that night, there was no laughter to second guess, no pressure to ignore what I felt, no voice telling me it was nothing. Just silence and control. I took another sip, and this time, I didn't hesitate.
If that was a joke, why did he plan it like an experiment?